Good morning. I am Kaitlyn Gavin, a graduating senior from Valley Stream Central High School in Valley Stream, New York, and this is my speech on why Theodore Roosevelt matters in the 21st century. Many of us at this time last year found ourselves flung into a life that we couldn't recognize. Quickly, we were faced with the new realities of masks, gloves, and hand sanitizer. For some of us, it might have been the most time we've ever spent in our houses or even with our families. Seemingly trapped in our homes and even worse, alone in our minds, it was preparing for this speech that I couldn't help but connect with the young Theodore Roosevelt. The circumstances may be vastly different, but I could relate to young Teddy, as he was called as a boy, as he too was separated from friends and schooling from home. Plagued with the pain of asthma, toothaches, abdominal pains, and headaches, Theodore Roosevelt spent most of his childhood indoors, indulging in tales of adventure. He journaled his thoughts, a habit he continued until he died, and despite being locked inside, he loved the outdoors. Whenever possible, he would collect plants and animals and bring them into his bedroom, which made it smell of preservation chemicals. His father, who couldn't stand that his son was weakened by various maladies, spent nights with him reading when he could not sleep, and even took him on midnight carriage rides through the city to fill his asthmatic lungs with air. Not only did he encourage and foster Titi's developing intellect and interests, but he pushed him to make his body. He built him a gymnasium in the basement where young Titi took up boxing. Over time, his asthma subsided and his strength grew. He could breathe again. Today, my generation is currently being suffocated with viruses, literal and figurative. The COVID-19 pandemic has kept me and my peers away from each other, isolated much of the time, and having missed out on so many social and collaborative events. We've been forced, much like little Titi, to pursue our interests and our education trapped in our bedroom. But like Theodore Roosevelt, we have the ability to come out of this exile stronger and better for it. Theodore Roosevelt used his time in quarantine to build his repertoire of interests, developing his mind and his body. My generation can look for inspiration in how Theodore Roosevelt spent his time in quarantine. His interests as a child were all reflected in his policies as an adult. As a conservationist, he set aside public lands to create national parks and even made efforts to protect wildlife. He went from collecting plants and animals in his bedroom to leading an expedition in Africa, which collected around 11,400 specimens for the Smithsonian. His pursuit of physical and mental fitness continued into adulthood as he championed the strenuous life, even continuing to wrestle his own Secretary of War William Taft while still in the Oval Office. One can see how Theodore Roosevelt's life was shaped by the childhood that Titi had spent indoors. I myself have dived back into my schoolwork, spent countless hours bonding with my family, and even taken more time to exercise by going on bike rides and doing yoga. The time in the void of this pandemic has not been idle, and Theodore Roosevelt has inspired me to focus on the things that I can gain and not the many things that have been taken away from me. As did Theodore Roosevelt, we are planting the seedlings right now and using our time locked up as not a shortcoming, but as a springboard for us to become the next leaders, innovators, and world changers. Theodore Roosevelt matters in the 21st century because he can teach us that this time locked up is a space where we can define who we want to become. We cannot label 2020 as a setback. We have a responsibility to propel ourselves into a future that we are proud of, a future that we create.